When you look back at the season from hell that the Fever had, none of us expected them to be in this situation. None of us expected them to be winning a very close Game 3.
What if I told you Caitlin Clark might actually play in the WNBA finals? Sounds impossible, right? For weeks, we have heard her season was finished, the groin injury too much to overcome, no chance of a return. But now, a little-known WNBA rule could give Clark a real pathway back onto the court if the Indiana Fever make it to the finals. Imagine it. The league's brightest star stepping back into the spotlight on the biggest stage of all. That kind of twist could flip the entire playoffs upside down. Of course, it's not simple. The rulebook, the medical risks, and the roster mechanics all intertwine, making the situation complicated. Some people dismiss it as a fantasy, while others believe the loophole exists for exactly this kind of moment. So today, let's break it all down. What the rule actually says, why India left themselves wiggle room, and how Clark's return could reshape the Fever's championship hopes. Here's the context. No one expected India to be here. At the start of the season, most analysts doubted they even sniffed the playoffs. The roster was young, inconsistent, and battling injuries. When Clark went down, it felt like the final blow. But instead of collapsing, the Fever fought their way to the semi-finals, one step from the finals. Aliyah Boston has stepped into a star role, Kelsey Mitchell has been lights out, and veterans like Natasha Howard and Odyssey Sims have steadied the ship. Even Sophie Cunningham, overlooked by many, has added energy and toughness. This team has become the definition of resilience. They are winning games they shouldn't win. Now imagine adding Clark back into the mix. That is why the buzz in India is so loud. Because with her return, the Fever's ceiling does not just rise, it skyrockets. That is what makes this whole discussion about Caitlin Clark's possible return so compelling. Let's rewind for a second and look at how we even got here. Clark hasn't suited up since suffering a groin injury weeks ago, an injury that prompted the Fever to declare her out for the rest of the regular season, and at the time, most assumed that meant the playoffs too. Groin injuries are unpredictable. Sometimes recovery is quick, other times they linger for months. Clark only managed about 13 games in her rookie season, which feels shocking given the massive hype around her debut. And for a while, she delivered, selling out arenas, boosting TV ratings, and making Indiana the WNBA's hottest ticket. Then, with one injury, the momentum collapsed. But here's the twist. Groin injuries typically take 2 to 6 weeks to heal, depending on severity. We are now past that recovery window. Clark has had time to rest, time to rebuild, and maybe even time to quietly prepare, which leads to the big question, if she's healthy enough, why not bring her back? That is when the conversation shifts from health to the rulebook, because it is not just about whether Clark is body ready, it is about whether the league allows it. Normally, once playoff rosters are locked at the end of the regular season, that is it. No hardship deals, no 7-day contracts, no late free agent signings. What you submit is what you have got, but buried in the WNBA rulebook is a clause that changes everything. Teams can reactivate players already under contract, but listed as inactive. That means players on maternity leave, suspension, or the injury list can technically be reactivated for the playoffs if a roster spot opens due to injury. And here's the kicker. Caitlin Clark fits that description. She's not an outsider or a free agent. She's signed, under contract, and very much part of the Fever organization. That is why the buzz is so loud. In theory, Indiana could activate her if certain conditions are met or if the league grants an exception. Now, to be clear, exceptions are rare. The WNBA does not hand them out casually, but the fact that the rule exists means Clark's return is not pure fantasy. There is a real pathway, however slim. And that's what makes this so fascinating. Fans thought her season ended the moment the injury was announced, but the KBA leaves the door cracked open. Being under contract is very different from being locked out. An inactive player can still be moved to the active roster under the right circumstances. This is not like hardship deals or emergency contracts that expire with the regular season. It is a unique wrinkle, and for someone of Clark's stature, it suddenly matters in a big way. Few players of her caliber have ever been in this exact situation, injured, sidelined, but technically eligible to return when the stakes are at their highest. That leaves Indiana with a massive decision. If Clark is cleared, do you bring her back? Or do you stick with the roster that fought its way here? Chemistry is fragile, and playoff basketball is unforgiving. The risks are obvious. She might not be in rhythm. She could re-injure herself, or she might disrupt a team that's finally clicking. But then again, even a 60% version of Caitlin Clark is still one of the most dangerous weapons in the league, and that's the gamble that could change everything. Shooting stretches defenses, her vision opens passing lanes, and her competitive fire elevates everyone around her. That's not just helpful, it's transformative. The potential reward here is massive. With Clark on the floor, the Fever suddenly have a real puncher's chance against anyone, even the defending champion Aces. He forces opponents to ring stranic streak, reshuffle matchups, and respect India in ways they might not otherwise. The dilemma is clear. Do the Fever gamble on their franchise star for a shot at history, or protect her long-term health and play it safe? It is the timeless battle, short-term glory versus long-term security. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Fever only submitted 11 players for their playoff roster. Despite being allowed 12, why leave a spot open? Some see it as a calculated move, a quiet insurance policy that keeps the door cracked for Clark's return. If there were no chance at all, why not fill the slot with a depth piece? Instead, the front office went in short-handed, trusting the group they had, and maybe, just maybe, leaving space for something bigger. Officially, the team hasn't confirmed anything, but the decision is suspicious enough to fuel plenty of speculation. If Indiana creases the finals and Clark comes back, that empty roster spot will look like one of the boldest strategic bets in WNBA history. Of course, none of it matters without the most important factor, Clark's health. Injuries don't magically disappear, and playoff basketball brings a level of physical intensity unlike anything else. The real question isn't just whether the rules allow it, it's whether Caitlin Clark is truly ready to step back into the fire. Reports suggest Caitlin Clark still hasn't been practicing at full speed with the team during this playoff run. That raises real questions about her conditioning, whether her body is ready for the grind of finals minutes. The risk of re-injury looms large if she comes back too soon. But here's the other side. Clark is a competitor to her core. She looks for pressure, she thrives in big moments, and even if she hasn't been in full team workouts, you can bet she's been rehabbing, training, and preparing behind the scenes. If there's even the slightest window to play, she's going to fight for it. Ready enough to elevate, not hurt the chances. If yes, Indiana could shock the basketball world. If not, this will go down as one of the great what-ifs in WNBA history. Now, picture this. Clark does return for the finals. Suddenly, the entire matchup with the powerhouse Las Vegas flips on its head. Without her, teams can clog the paint, swarm Aliyah Boston, and dare the Fever's guards to shoot. With Clark, that strategy collapses. Her limitless shooting stretches defenses, creating space for Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, and Sophie Cunningham to attack. Indiana offense instantly becomes more dynamic. On defense, Clark isn't flawless, but her presence lets the Fever push the pace, gamble in passing lanes, and generate transition opportunities. Even at less than 100%, her vision and basketball IQ can swing critical possessions. And let's be real, the hype alone would be seismic. A finals with